I want to bring on somebody who I've been a fan of for a good many years, and I've got to credit him, as I did in the last segment, with bringing something that had been escaped my attention, and now it has been in the forefront of my consciousness for a couple of years now, ever since he uttered it. Alan Dershowitz, an American lawyer, academic. He's a lifelong Democrat and scholar of the United States constitutional law and criminal law. Mr. Dershowitz, welcome to the Chris Saucedo Show.
Well, thank you so much. Pleasure to be on.
The credit to you goes, it was you who said a few years ago, I remember this, it was on Fox, and you said you were increasingly troubled by the growing strain of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party, a party that you have belonged to your entire life. And it seems to have continued to metastasize. And I think we have a couple of examples of this in a person we call MF Tlaib because of her utterances, and also Ilhan Omar, these two congresswomen who are now openly anti-Semitic and seeming to be embraced by the Democrat Party. What's your take on this?
Well, I don't think they're being embraced. I agree with you. I think Omar certainly has uttered many anti-Semitic tropes, talking about people voting for Israel because of the money and Israel hypnotizing the world and Jews having dual loyalty, all the classic anti-Semitic tropes. But they were criticized she was criticized for that by Nancy Pelosi, by many Democrats. There's now a group being formed by Democrats in Congress to show opposition to this kind of anti-Semitism. I think that these people have to be marginalized within the Democratic Party. Let's remember that the three people who were recently elected, three women, don't represent districts that are so typical of the electorate in the United States. They're districts, they're entitled to be represented, obviously. But I don't think any of the three of them could be elected statewide in any American state. Cynthia Nixon tried to run in New York, and she was resoundingly defeated as a kind of radical. And I think none of these women could win a statewide election. They win in their districts because their districts are small. In New York, for example, I think 12 or 14,000 people voted for the new congresswoman. And I think we have comparable numbers in other places.
Well,
I think all of them could be primaried.
Well, let me push back gently on this, because you know the name Steve King. Steve King, he said another utterance that many people regarded as racist. And the Republican Party stripped him. All he is one vote now. He has no committee assignments. But Nancy Pelosi insists that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, even despite their anti-Semitism, they maintain their positions of authority and power on prestigious committees.
I agree with you. Yeah. And I think Republicans have acted more forcefully to disassociate themselves with anti-Semitism. It's interesting because historically, anti-Semitism has come much more from the right than from the left. The phenomenon of left-wing anti-Semitism, relatively new in our country. Although historically in the world, the hard left has always been anti-Semitic, going back to Marx and Voltaire.
Sure.
But in the United States, it's a relatively new phenomenon. I congratulate the Republican Party for doing that, just as I congratulated my friend Bill Buckley when he took on Pat Buchanan and said that he couldn't defend that what he has said has been anti-Semitic. So the right and the Republicans have done a better job than the left and the Democrats. I remain a Democrat because I want to encourage the Democratic Party to do a better job. I want to see Omar stripped of her position on the committees, particularly
Foreign Intelligence, Foreign Relations Committee. Yeah, I mean that's insane. Somebody with that attitude toward Israel is on the Foreign Relations Committee. It boggles the mind. Let me move on to a couple of more issues. Chief among them, I want you to dip into your constitutional and criminal law expertise. There are a band of blue states now.
Writing the Constitution today, I might have direct election of the president. It would change the nature of campaigning in America, and reasonable people could debate that, and it probably should be debated. There's a big difference between amending the Constitution, which is proper, and circumventing the Constitution. This is a very clever way of circumventing the Constitution, having states commit to give all their electoral votes to whoever wins the national election. It would raise all kinds of constitutional questions. First of all, you're denying the right of the citizens who voted overwhelmingly in a state for candidate A, and you're giving them votes to candidate B. It brings me back to one of the earlier elections in American history when John Quincy Adams ran against Andrew Jackson. Jackson overwhelmingly won the popular vote and even won the electoral vote, But the electors, who in those days had the right to decide whoever they thought would be the better president, thought that Adams would be the better president. They made him president. It was called the corrupt bargain.
Yep.
And 4 years later, Jackson was elected overwhelmingly. I don't think that ultimately the American people in the courts would accept this circumvention of the electoral college.
Well, if they pull the trigger, what's the remedy here? What do you think that could be done about what I would classify as rebel states?
Well, I don't analogize states that are trying to do this to states that much of slavery, but I do. It'll end up in the courts. And if you had asked me 20 years ago, would the courts intrude? I would have said no. But after Bush versus Gore in 2000, it's very likely the courts might intrude in what they regard as a manipulation of the electoral college. It would be a really major constitutional crisis if this passed and enough electors elected candidate A and then candidate B brought a lawsuit and the courts either said we're not going to intrude or we will intrude and we reverse this. It would really be a constitutional crisis. You'd have two people vying for the White House, and it'd be unclear which institution of government would have the ultimate authority. That's why I hope these changes aren't made in this manner.
Well, I hope so too. As someone who reveres the Constitution,
yeah.
Professor, I hope you're right. Alan Dershowitz, our guest right now here, ladies and gentlemen, on the Chris Saucedo Show. Last thing I wanted you to comment on was this pivot by the Democrat Party, and it's being used to great effect by the Republicans, this pivot towards socialism. I've always regarded you as a traditional Democrat, one that doesn't embrace socialism, communism, the extreme left wing, but remains just a disagreement on how to attain common national goals. Where do you sit on this large lurch left from the Democrat Party?
Look, we are very fortunate in America. We never had a strong communist party or fascist party. In the 1920s and 30s, when all over Europe the fight was between the communists and the fascists, you couldn't get a centrist party. We had Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who introduced some elements of fairness in the New Deal, but didn't move towards socialism. In fact, it was a liberal Democrat who saved us from socialism and communism. And so I stand strongly in the middle. I'm a liberal centrist who believes in widespread health care for people. I went to a free college, free public college. I couldn't have gone to college if we didn't have the New York City colleges, Brooklyn College. I would like to see free colleges on the state level if we can afford it. There are many elements of what people on the left want that I would support, but I would not support the end of our free market system. We thrive on the free market. We have proved the free market to be economically superior to any form of socialism. Most socialist states have failed, certainly Venezuela, certainly the former Soviet Union. We see some states, particularly in Northern Europe, that have elements of socialism that seem to have succeeded, but it's not broken. Don't fix it. We can do things to improve our free market system and to make it fairer, but socialism is not the way, and I don't think the Democratic Party will move in that direction. If they do, won't get elected. Look what happened when they nominated even McGovern or Dukakis or Mondale. In each of those elections, they got a handful of states. I think they've learned their lesson. They need to nominate a centrist who believes in the free market system and who wants to make the free market system fairer than it currently is.
Well, the education system has, many on my side would rationalize, the education system has devolved since then. We're graduating a whole generation, at last couple of generations, Generation Z and the millennials, who don't seem to have a visceral reaction as we do in Gen X and before to communism and socialism, collectivist thought. Does that concern you?
It does. And they also, many in the new generation, many, you can't generalize, not all, certainly, maybe not even a majority, don't have an appreciation for freedom of speech and for due process. They know, quote, the truth. And if they accuse somebody of something sexual, it must be true. Therefore, what do you need due process? If they want to have a BDS, what do you need to have an opposing point of view? That's the truth. That's what we so the intolerance for process, the intolerance for the marketplace of ideas, the intolerance for due process of law is very, very disturbing.
In short, intolerance for the Constitution and its protections. That's how I'd rationalize it. Alan, yes.
The Constitution today is seen as paternalistic,
white,
colonialistic, imperial. document, and many people don't understand that it is what distinguishes us from other countries in the world.
Amen to that. Alan Dershowitz, everybody, American lawyer and academic, lifelong Democrat, scholar of the United States Constitution and criminal law. We'll have to get into Bob Mueller as an investigation on another program. Thank you so much for being here, sir, on the Chris Saucedo Show. Much appreciated you being here, sir.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel. Newsmax TV is now available for free on your smartphone. Just go to your iPhone or Android store and download the free Newsmax TV app. Then you can watch free TV news with an American spin anytime, anywhere in the world. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.